The zombie, the disposable unit of the undead race, used for all the tasks that the Red Army would use human beings. As a result, the poor little skeleton is rarely if ever used. But that all ends today, because our Ozempic-loving friends will get their chance to prove their worth to the motherland. The rules are simple. I cannot recruit any unit other than the basic skeletons. That includes heroes. I will win when I say so. We start by picking Heinrich Himmler, who looks an awful lot like a man I once saw in a Mossad wanted poster, and begin our adventure somewhere in the mountains of Argentina. We begin by exploiting our natural resources, getting the basics of our tech tree, and then setting out to slaughter the local population. At this point, they're no match for our vastly superior army, though that won't last long. With the natives now subdued, we're going to recruit the only thing we can. This makes our initial units that aren't skeletons very valuable. With that out of the way, we're off to visit one of the local inns and sample some fine ale. Having had our fill, we decide to head on to Castle Artois to make hay while the sun shines and our army doesn't completely suck. Behind the lines, we recruit a necromancer lord and begin recruiting yet more skeletons. The battle for the castle goes absolutely stellar. We continue picking up some essential upgrades and begin setting a clever trap for some nearby stunties. Being as intellectually challenged as they are short, the dwarves fall for the trap and are surrounded. While the dwarven army is no doubt vastly superior to ours in terms of quality, we have a small advantage in terms of numbers. In fact, now would probably be a good time to explain how this run has a chance in hell of succeeding. You see, given the fact that everyone in our entire empire is already deceased, we don't pay for anything in good old-fashioned gold. Instead, the undead faction uses dark magic to summon rather than recruit units. But there's a unique mechanic by which we can recruit units directly from graveyards of fallen soldiers rather than from recruitment buildings like almost everyone else in this game. That means that for every massive battle we lose in this game, we also gain more Skelly Boys that we can instantly replenish over and over and over again. This should allow us to lose a battle, an entire army, immediately replenish it, and still win. Along with this, our faction comes with a lot of tech to improve our basic Skelly Boys. The turns continue to tick by just fine, until suddenly we're attacked by the Fey Enchantress, who has come to the defense of the dwarves in an astounding act of intersectional feminism. Our strategy for battles like these is simple. We don't have one. Our tactic, if you dare to call it that, involves balling up into a large ball and healing ourselves over and over again with a spell called Invocation of Nehek. If we're unlucky enough to be facing a foe that has a large amount of range units, we're forced to sit there until they run out of ammunition. This is an ideal tactic for the elderly, the infirm, and the otherwise abled. The Fey Enchantress gets literally boned, and despite our acceptable casualties, we just immediately re-recruit and head back to the front lines. With our endless hordes of bony boys, we force a peace treaty from the Fey Enchantress along with Marienburg to the north. Because we've got to pack up this skeletal Wehrmacht and head off to Bastogne. With a little bit of strategic thinking, I draw out one army and then take a settlement with the other. The AI helpfully assists me in creating a giant bone pile near my new settlement. Meanwhile, Heinrich just walks right in the back door. I'll admit, at this point in the playthrough, I thought I was actually doing a really good job, but it turned out I was at the very wrong end of the Dunning-Kruger graph. And who better to remind me of that fact other than that Greenpeace mascot masquerading as a legendary lord, Durthu. You see, I did not know this yet, but we'll soon find out that Durthu presents a unique problem for my Skelly Boys. You see, Durthu is a big man made entirely of wood, and as a man made of wood, he likes to command an army mostly made of little men mostly made of wood. As a result, some of Durthu's better units are literally immortal to some of my skeletal armies, as I'm painfully about to find out. To say that the next battle does not go well is a massive understatement, and it takes Heinrich Himmler coming back to be able to confront Durthu, and even then, I barely manage it, and I mean barely. What follows are a series of battles upon battles between me and Mr. Evil Tree Man. Eventually, though, we reach a critical mass point at which the amount of skeletons I can recruit is clearly still not enough. And I was beginning to think the first video on this channel might turn out to be a bit of a wash, but like that spider said to Robert the Bruce, stick to activity and summon more skeletons. With good old Heinrich sent back to the front lines, we find out that Durthu is now in trouble, because this is the true point where we have reached criticality. Despite all of the losses inflicted on my armies, the bone piles surrounding the area are just too numerous, and it's virtually impossible for the slow recruiting wood elves to stand a chance against my skelly boys. To the point that even when the Fey Enchantress decides to come back for revenge, she's quickly overwhelmed by the sheer amount of skeletons that devour her Bretonnian peasant friends. At this point, this has gone from a challenge run to a sort of instructional tutorial for myself on why it's not worth it to build balanced armies in Warhammer 3. The aforementioned advantages I mentioned at the start of the video have now begun to mount up to the point where our mathematical advantages are just too much, even for Mel Gibson. The Bretonnian factions literally begin to crumble around my horde of skeletons as we take Carcassonne from the Fey Enchantress. As I stand back and proudly survey my empire, I realize that it's taken me over 70 turns to conquer what I would normally do in around 15. But I am confident that at this point, with an infinite amount of turns and an infinite amount of skeletons, I could theoretically conquer the entire map. As I reflect upon the consequences of this realization, I am suddenly struck by the fact that one day I too will die and be buried in a boneyard waiting for good old Heinrich Himmler to come along and raise me up to fight in one of his armies. And I decide that as long as I still have breath in my lungs and movement in my cripplingly arthritic hands, I'm not gonna spend that time spamming skeletons all over a map in Warhammer 3. So we're calling it here, boys. Can you play Warhammer 3 summoning only skeletons? Yeah, it's actually not that bad. It is a playstyle. Is it a playstyle for sane or well-balanced individuals? Not exactly. But it is a playstyle nonetheless. You enjoyed whiling away your hours on this planet watching this video? Well, give me a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.